All right, welcome everyone. It is Wednesday, it's 4:30 p.m. Central Time, and that means it's time for the office hours here on the ViaMonstra Academy. I'm Johan, Andrew is Andrew, and I will be your host in this session where we will provide updates for MDT, ConfigMgr, Intune, and we will also happily answer any questions you might have on either those platforms or related topics, imaging, PowerShell, you name it. So that being said, let's get this show on the road. All right. Hello, good sir. Welcome back.
Hello there. How are you?
Oh, we're good. I have my coffee, Mandalorian t-shirt. Life is pretty good.
Absolutely. I don't know about you, but I've spent enough time outside clearing snow off that it looks like it's melted away for the rest of the day. So I'm happy.
Well, we still have a good chunk laying around, and I built 2 hay boxes for the horses so they will be able to eat a little bit outside the ground. But the first thing they do, they take the hay out of the hay box, throw it on the ground, and they're eating it on the ground.
As long as they're happy, right?
They look happy, yeah. Anyhow, what's up?
Yes.
What's been going on in our little industry lately?
So, yeah, a couple of things that I picked up from the last week or so, if you don't mind sharing my screen.
That I can do as soon as I find it.
All right. This one was fresh today that I came across, and I'll start with this. WIM Witch from our friend Donna Ryan. Can we have a moment of silence? Great tool that Donna supported for several years now that helped manage service WIM files for Windows, obviously. Donna has moved into a role at Microsoft that has her focusing on Windows 365. She made that move quite a while ago now. I think at least a year at this point. And so her focus has rightfully been elsewhere, and so it has come time to end of life that community tool. As she mentions in this post, it should at least continue to work until the next version of Windows 10 and 11 ships. But I just wanted to give a shout out to Donna and thank her for, if she happens to watch this, for all of the work put into this community tool. I know it was a very popular tool, a lot of people using it. So sad to see it go, but I know the time and effort that was put into it was much appreciated by many in the community.
Yeah, fantastic tool. And so, as you said, I'm sad to see it go, but it's certainly understandable. And Donna, thank you so much. It's been great having this tool around.
Absolutely. Oh, we should convince her to come back sometime this year and join us for office hours again.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Love that.
I'll make you a note of that right now.
Perfect. Hey, I told you I'm firing on all cylinders today.
Pen and paper goes a long way. All right.
Yes, absolutely. All right. What else do we have here? PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit. We talked about a big update a couple of weeks ago, 3.9.0. There was a 3.9.1 release that had a few bug fixes. I think somebody may have even mentioned one on our office hours one day after 3.9 was released. So good stuff there. Always like to see bug fixes. And again, I know that's a very popular tool. Came across this tweet. I think we both came across this tweet from Nickolaj. Has a PowerShell module for managing Win32 apps in Intune. But he added a samples folder in the GitHub repository here to provide some samples on just different scenarios that you may use this module. Say, create an app, for example. So this is pretty cool stuff. And of course, as he encourages in his tweet, since this is a community tool and it's out on GitHub, if you have other samples you'd like to add, please hop in and add a pull request to add to these samples. I know everybody would appreciate that.
Yeah, I was actually working on that earlier this week. I've been trying to mass create several hundred apps at the same time in Intune with the purpose of trying to overload the policy limit as quickly as possible. Fairly successful, I might say, but that's some upcoming samples as well on a blog post I've been working on for a bit. So look out for that one in the future too. And I happen to know that Nickolaj is working on a new version of this module, version 1.4.0. And hopefully that one will be out soon as well.
All right, little insider information today.
Heck yeah.
That's awesome. And of course, I'm not surprised to hear that you were trying to create hundreds of apps at one time. That's awesome. I'm very much looking forward to that blog post.
What you do?
That's right. Oliver posted an update to his Autopilot Manager solution that makes managing Autopilot devices a little bit easier. So he added a couple of functions to this tool, basically for some specific customers, had some specific logic to use. So he added those functions right into the tool. Looks like it should make things a little bit easier, especially for help desk in this case. If you're using this tool out there, always love to see, like so many other people we talk about on here. I always love to see Oliver's solutions. They're awesome.
They are. Yeah.
So thank you, Oliver, for that update. Niall posted an update to the windows-noob index of step-by-step guides to include the recent Windows 365 content that he's been posting over the last several weeks. So I saw he tweeted about this earlier. Wanted to just shout that out. For most of you that have been in the ConfigMgr or Intune space for any amount of time, you've probably come across the Windows Noob website, and Niall has a fantastic library of information here for beginners all the way to admins that have been working with these products for many years. So
expert level, yeah.
Yes. Thank you. I think one of my cylinders shut off there for a moment. And last but certainly not least, something that I was very excited to see earlier today is none other than our friend Johan getting announced as an MMS speaker for 2023. So very excited for this. Love to see that. So congratulations to you, sir.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Will be great fun.
Yes, can't wait. How about you? Come across a few things this past week?
Yeah, I mean, last night was kind of interesting. I guess early morning for some people, but Microsoft 365/Azure was down for a bit there, and the official explanation was that there was a network configuration being applied. Didn't quite turn out the way it was supposed to. They rolled it back fairly quickly. So I think the total outage lasted like 2.5-3 hours ish, something like that. Still wonder if someone simply didn't trip on a cable in the data center somewhere, but something network related at least. They didn't say whether it was DNS or not, but I have my bets on it being DNS. It usually is.
Indeed it is.
Yeah. Then, of course, speaking of MMS, by the way, we have our own Crocodile Dundee, Stephen Hoskin. He was announced as a speaker as well. And most people know that are working in the Intune land of things. He is part or one of the founders of the Intune.training YouTube channel. Him and Adam and others are providing some amazing content over the years. So congrats, Stephen. See you in Minneapolis, it seems like, in May or late April/May. So good stuff there. And of course, I got excited. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen real quick when I happen to find it. Give me just 1 second. Live, what can possibly go wrong in a... Here we go. This one goes up, this one goes back. Magic. So this was the announcement for Stephen, flying up all the way from Australia again. It's quite the flight to Minneapolis, but all right.
Yes.
Then I noticed that the Intune support account tweeted out that they're rolling out 2301 in APAC. And of course, the moment I saw that one, I went to my tenant and started to hit Control F5 here like crazy. But unfortunately, still 2212 here. So hopefully in the next few days, it will show up here. This tenant is actually over in Europe, so we'll see. We'll see. Then Peter had a great blog post around some of the new features, one of the new features regarding multiple admin approvals in Intune. So I'm going to highlight that post. We had Jürgen being busy with a blog post. This one was regarding security settings for Edge, or a baseline for Edge. So haven't had a chance to try it out yet, but I saw it showed up and I figured, well, why not? Not entirely sure why I didn't. Here we go. Just needed a moment. So, and last but not least, turn out that Mr. Andrew here on the call has been busy providing updates for our hydration kits, and also announced here some plan updates coming. And among things that were changed was the so here in the hindsight, it's very easy to, of course, we should have done this years and years ago, because the default network is often conflicting with other home networks and whatnot. But now we have a new default network and some other stuff. And as you can see here, Andrew has been busy planning along with some other changes as well. So thank you, good sir. Love to see this.
Happy to do it. This is a lot of fun. I think I've got a few weeks of work ahead of me for sure.
Yep, indeed. All right. Questions. Let's see here.
Yeah, we've got, Matt and Robert on YouTube both saying hi. Thank you guys for joining us today.
Hi back. Yep.
Matt had a question. What is the difference between enable CMG and use MP and DP in the cloud and using Intune to deploy applications to computers via the portal?
All right. You want to take that one?
So let's see. Let me read. So difference between using the CMG in the cloud and using Intune to deploy applications. Yeah, if I understand the question correctly, basically the two deploying applications through the various systems, right? In one form, we're going to be deploying the apps through ConfigMgr by default using Software Center, or if you change your client settings to use the company portal, deploying your apps that way. Otherwise, using Intune to deploy Microsoft Store apps, Win32 apps, what have you. And those are just always going to use the company portal.
I mean, I think I can add to that, because there was also looped into, all right, what if I take my current, I'm just going to update my design document here a little bit here. We're going to throw in a site server that also happens to be a management point. I can obviously take these servers here, put them up in Azure, and pay for them running as normal VMs. And I would have a site-to-site network configured so that my clients even though these are now up in Azure instead of my on-premises environment or on my own data center, they will still talk directly to the servers and download apps and whatnot. When you use a cloud management gateway, it acts as a proxy for the clients. So it's not like when you have internet-based client management back in the early days of ConfigMgr, like a decade ago, where clients would basically remote in directly or like have an inbound firewall connection in your network, but now they rather go to the VM in Azure, that is the CMG. So they talk to that one, and your site server talk to the CMG. Very, very different, and also very, very different in cost, because if you have a single CMG, the cost for that VM alone is only about $100. But if you take your entire ConfigMgr infrastructure with a site server, including SQL, management point, a few DPs, maybe a software update point, so you have a good few VMs running up there, you're now about like up to say $1,000 a month just paying for having those beefier servers running totally up in Azure. So it's basically come down to back to a cost question, and also where you want to host your stuff. You want to have it in your data center, or you want to pay to have it in someone else's data center. All right.
Yep. Matt had a follow-up. What about apps via Intune into the company portal? So I think in that case, you're just going to create the app in Intune, and then you're going to assign to a group of users or devices. And if they are assigned as available, they should be visible in the company portal. If they're assigned as required, they'll just come down to the user or device at the time of the next sync.
Yeah, indeed.
So hopefully that helps. Interesting. I just had a spider drop down from the ceiling right in front of me. It's very distracting.
All right.
All right. Indeed. Robert is, let's see. Robert is saying, I've concluded that DPs that are approximately 230 millisecond TTL time from SCCM that regular client installed does not work. I have to manually copy the client folder and execute it locally on the DP.
That is not something I have seen, and I'm working with a few customers currently that have way higher latency than that to some of their remote locations. Almost 1,000 retail stores in China for a start, where are not the greatest bandwidth and latency. So I haven't seen that being a limit. Obviously, it can take time, and it can cause timeouts when the clients are trying to download content, etc., or trying to register. But I have not seen that. So I have a feeling it must be something else involved in that mix. I mean, the workaround is fairly elegant. Download the stuff first and run it, but I have not seen it fail because of that.
All right.
The only thing I can think of as a fix is making sure that LEDBAT is enabled on those distribution points so that the clients get a little bit of priority over that type of traffic when it's downloading stuff from a DP. I can also think of adding in branch cache to the DPs and allow the client to use that content as a cache. That changes a little bit how content is downloaded and a little bit of resiliency in that mix. But those are basically two things I can come across. If anyone have similar issues with latency preventing the client from being installed, by all means, comment here in the chat, and we'll be happy to discuss it further. But if I go to one of my site servers here, definitely make sure that good lord, this one here is enabled, assuming you're on 2016 and above. And optionally, if you don't mind taking through that extra work and configuring peer-to-peer, you can have this one as well. That's a little bit of a bigger project. This checkbox here is like click, done, you're good to go. All right.
Robert had a follow-up comment too. I have a WAN emulator. I can duplicate these conditions and it works fine. Weird. It is, yeah. All right.
Yeah, it could be interesting if there is actually package loss in the mix. Because that can certainly freak out the downloads. I know that if you use pfSend, for example, as a virtual router, you can fake package loss in that one. So you not only can you put in a high latency on both up and downloads, but you can also say I want a 0.1 package loss and see if that kind of breaks stuff. But yeah.
All right. Yeah, like Johan said, if anybody else has seen that, we'd be happy to hear. As well as, Robert, if you do get that resolved later on, we'd also be happy if you come back and share with us.
Yeah.
All right. I've got a question from Harbinder on LinkedIn. I have an Intune question. I'm deploying a kiosk mode only with auto login. I have it configured to only launch the kiosk browser. This is working perfect. However, how do I prevent other Azure AD accounts from signing into the machine? At the moment, if the user press Control-Delete, they can log in. I would like this to stop, and only auto login should work.
That I do not know the answer to.
No, I haven't worked too much with kiosks. Perhaps something in the settings catalog, one of the configuration profiles may be able to prevent something like that. Would be a guess for my part.
I know that Sandy that we have here on the Academy from time to time, she has done a lot of work on kiosk devices. So maybe we can check in with her and come back the following week and see if we have a better answer than I don't know, because that's the current one.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's put that one on the back burner, and hopefully we can get back to that next week with a better answer.
Sounds good. All right. Raymond is asking, I have co-management configured and have separate admin accounts for Intune versus ConfigMgr. There are some things in our Intune admin accounts cannot do from the endpoint console because of permissions. And on a follow-up question, are we supposed to use our on-prem ConfigMgr admin accounts with Intune admin permissions?
Quite the other way around, if I understand that question correctly. The on-prem users that you sync up, they need to have permissions in ConfigMgr for you to use the tenant attached features in Intune. Or did I misread it somehow?
So co-management is configured, separate accounts for Intune and ConfigMgr. Some things that their Intune admin accounts cannot do from the endpoint console because of permissions.
Yeah, I didn't say what type of things, but if it is the tenant attached items, it is simply because that account is not an on-premises account and does not have permissions in ConfigMgr. And Intune won't say permission denied. It will say something configuration missing or something like that. So that's what I've seen. If that may answer the question.
Yep. Raymond, hopefully that helps. Let us know though if there's something we missed though on that. John's asking on LinkedIn, during SCCM deployment imaging of a Lenovo T14, we cannot get the touchpad driver to get installed, even with the correct drivers from the OEM in the task sequence. Is there a specific log file that can help us troubleshoot this driver install or non-install in this case?
I mean, yes, so there are three phases for it. First of all, making sure that the driver actually gets copied down during imaging, and the sequence through calling DISM can stage it into the driver store. Simply look in the store or check the DISM log file to review why or why not it couldn't be staged in the store. And the final piece is when, after the reboot, in the specialized path where Windows actually tries to install the driver, there is a good deal of a ranking process in place. And something I stumbled across around touchpad drivers specifically is that if you accidentally feed drivers from other models as well, like a combo packet or something, the ranking might actually trick Windows into picking the wrong one. And the setup api.dev.log file will give you hints on if multiple files are found. You will see something like this. Am I still sharing the screen, by the way?
Yes.
Yes, I am. All right. So if I go here and here and here and bring up a log file, and when Windows only find like one matching driver, there is little argument of which driver it's going to pick. But the minute it finds two or more drivers, this is where the ranking process kicks in, and the information here, the actual ranking score, will determine which driver that wins. And here in this case, lower is winning. So the lowest value, the better. An inbox driver will typically have a higher level, higher rank because they don't have a feature score. A few exceptions apply, but that's usually how you can troubleshoot it by reviewing this log file here. I have seen, this was a while ago, and it was not Lenovo, it was Panasonic, some of their tough books where we actually need to install an application for the touchpad driver to be happy. There was some correlation between the driver and a service or an app or something for them to work. So maybe that.
Cool.
And speaking of drivers, actually came in a question earlier today. Someone asking if we could show it in the office hour, and apparently Kyla showed up just to show that. But it was regarding adding MDT drivers for WinPE, so I figured I can show that while we're speaking of drivers anyway. So this particular question was that a device started up on WinPE and there was a network driver missing. So instead of connecting to the deployment share, we just getting a message saying, hey, a connection to the deployment share could not be made, following device ID, etc., etc., etc. So in this case, it was Lenovo, but it obviously is the same for all type of hardware. So if I would go to a folder where I have some WinPE drivers, in this case, I have one from HP, a bunch of drivers. I have a few from Dell, etc. The trick is to figure out what driver you need. And MDT is nice in a way because it will show you the plug and play ID number. And once you have that plug and play ID number, of course, you can search for it. So in this case, obviously, it was a network driver. So say, for example, that the number that was shown was this number here, the 8152, and they show it not like this, but they show it as a vendor and a device ID. So a 4-digit vendor, a 4-digit device ID, and sometimes they will show up as a USB device as well as this. Let me pick a different driver. See if I get a better example by luck. This is an Intel driver, that will go just fine. So here you have a typical scenario. This is what MDT will show you. Something like this. Vendor ID, Intel, 4-digit device ID like this. And you can just search for that. You can open up your favorite PowerShell prompt or whatever you like to load your PowerShell in. And PowerShell, file system stuff. And I really do not need your help now, Kylo. Thank you so much. But I'm good. And you can search for file content. So you can search for, driver files matching a specific vendor ID or device ID or something. And then life will be good. So if I would set a location to some of those network drivers here, oops, not that one, but this one here, maybe a few quotes here and there, and then run this command, it should tell me that, all right, this particular folder appears to have a driver that is matching that device ID. So now I know what driver I should use. So now I will go to that folder. That will be this one here. And I will copy that up to my deployment share. Or my deployment server. So I will go to my MDT server and I will just put it somewhere where I have it. Typically drivers folder, something. And I have some WinP drivers here, some network drivers there. I'm just going to nuke them for now. I don't need them for this demo. So I'm going to paste that folder in. I promise you I copied it. One more time. Copy and paste. Don't ask. And in MDT, I recommend in your production deployment shares that you use for where you have all the drivers that you actually create a separate folder for WinP drivers. And when you do that, you also create a filter that is matching that folder. So I will have a WinP filter that is using that folder here. Because then in my deployment share, I can limit MDT to only pick boot image drivers that are in that filter. And that allows me to use more than normal network and storage class drivers. I can use other drivers as well that I might be needed. I don't like the default MDT behavior to include every net and storage drivers it finds, because that also include Wi-Fi and Bluetooth drivers by default, and you do not want to have those by default in your boot image. Exceptions apply, but not for Bluetooth. Wi-Fi can be done. Anyhow, to have that configured, and then you only need to import that driver into MDT. So selecting whatever folder you copied it to, and then next finish here on the import. And once you have done that you update your deployment share. It will take a few minutes, but you need to do that every time you update a boot image. And if you are using Pixie, after doing that update, you also have to open up your WDS console or whatever Pixie server you're using and replace that boot image here with the new one. All right. And for those who wonders, I purposely stopped the server because I have two Pixie servers on the same subnet in this lab. And when you have that and both are running, they will fight. So
can make for some interesting results.
So anyhow, that's how you add in drivers to MDT. First, figure out what driver you need, search for it, add it in, and add in only the driver you need. Just because a vendor happen to have 89 different drivers that you can import, you're only bloating the boot image. Mm-hmm. You normally only need like 5, 7, 6, 8 something drivers extra. All right.
Very cool. Thank you for that demo.
Yeah.
All right, we got at least one other question, but before I touch on that, Raymond replied that you were actually correct about the configuration missing, since their Intune admin accounts are cloud only. Yeah. Trying to keep with best practice of not having on-prem accounts with admin role. And another follow-up, perhaps we're misinterpreting that guidance, or co-management would be an exception. And I don't know if you've ever come across it, Johan, on the SCCM subreddit. There's actually a Jason Sandys bot that has its opinions about best practices. I'm sure if you've not been on there, you've heard Jason's opinions on best practices at the very least. I'm going to grab a quote right here. There is no best practice. You use whatever works for you. So in this case, I would say if those are the two accounts and that's the way that you want to be managing it, it may not follow the strict black and white. I don't think you're misinterpreting that guidance at all, Raymond, because that is, from what I've seen, that has been Microsoft's guidance. If you're going to be having an admin role in Azure AD, have it a separate account. But definitely in this case, if you want the same account to be able to do those two things, unless you're aware of a way, Johan, I don't think you have a choice.
Now, in this case, you need to use a user that has permissions in ConfigMgr, and that has to be a local user.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Johan,
I can show what it looks like because it's extremely easy to emulate. Log into a tenant as a user that in this case is cloud only. Even though this account happened to be a global admin, if I go to a tenant attached device and try to do some clever things like this device here, I think. Yeah, this one is a ConfigMgr device. So this one is tenant attached. But if I start to want to do stuff here with this, that is simply not going to work. It's going to argue and give me a configuration missing. Brilliant. But if I jump over to this server here, where I happen to have an admin user here, the on-prem Johan account that is an admin in ConfigMgr, actually not in Intune, but in ConfigMgr it's an admin. And I go to that tenant there, logged in as that same tenant, but I'm logged in as this synced account. Then I can run CM queries all day long, or CM pivot queries all day long in real time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, shortened version.
Good stuff. Looks like there was a follow-up comment earlier too from when you were mentioning LEDBAT. Danny mentioned on YouTube non-LEDBAT. Just a comment: non-LEDBAT traffic will always win over LEDBAT traffic.
In a way, when ConfigMgr sets up LEDBAT, it set it up for port 80 and 443 traffic between the DP or to and from the distribution points. Meaning, if a ConfigMgr client gets the content, yes, it will use LEDBAT for very specific content types. But I have actually an example, and thank you. Let's see who it was.
Danny over on YouTube.
Danny, thank you, Danny, for mentioning this. If I would, and I blogged about that behavior a while ago. Here, if you have another client trying to do something else, like copying a file. So here I had one PC that was just doing normal ConfigMgr download of something, while the first PC kicked off one PC doing a normal copy or downloading of a package, and then another PC started to do something completely different, like copying a file for a file server on that subnet. What happened was that on the first PC, you would see that the traffic that was chugging along nicely here at 10 megabit suddenly dropped when that other file copy happened. and it resumed back again as soon as that file copy was done. So LEDBAT enables you to use more of your WAN links. It usually scares your networking folks because they will suddenly see that, oh, good Lord, you are using 100% of the WAN traffic. Yeah, isn't that good? As long as I'm a nice citizen and back off when other clients needs to have a Teams meeting or download, in this case, copy a file. So to me, it's a no-brainer. I highly recommend enable it. Sidebar. Yeah.
Great one. Love it. All right, Matt was asking, what are the global conditions in SCCM? What and why would you use them?
All right. I can bring it up and you can talk about it. How about that?
All right.
All right. Help if we click the right node.
Yeah, because there are quite a few that come default, right?
Yeah.
In here, so global conditions basically are rules that you can create that represent specific conditions. So, for example, we see the operating system ones there, or a co-managed device, and they'll tell a client how an application, or if an application should actually be provided to it if you have the application deployed. I think is probably the most high-level version of that.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if I take an application that I have here, whatever that might be, and start to poke around for this app, that there will be, when you set up your deployment types for an application, in this case, I have a script-based deployment type, but it could be MSI or whatever you're using. There will be requirement rules for it. And this is where you can add in these different ready-made conditions, or you can create your own custom conditions. Of course, you can create as many as you want in that environment, but I can say that, for this application to be allowed to be installed, you must have more than 5 gigs of disk space, something like that, on maybe the system drive. So that's the use of a global condition. You use it as a requirement for apps primarily. Anything you'd like to add there, good sir?
No, that's said very well.
All right. I don't see any other questions that we didn't answer.
Nope, not at the moment. I was trying to look into the kiosk question a little bit, but there were a few settings that I wasn't familiar with. Kind of hit a brick wall there. So,
an A for effort, right? So
that's the thought that counts, I hope.
But we still have a whopping 50 minutes available if anyone have a question. By all means, we'll be happy to answer. In the meantime, I'm gonna remind the good folks watching this that on Thursday next week, we have a shiny guest where me and Michael Niehaus will spend a good hour and a half in a PowerShell prompt and a command prompt doing setup internals, Windows 10 and Windows 11 inners in terms of how the setup is behaving. And for those who don't know Niehaus, he's pretty much the deployment father in our community. He worked with Microsoft for 20 some years on this, for almost 20 some years, and then he moved over to Titanium, and we continuing to doing deployment stuff over there. There are not many things this gentleman doesn't know about deployment, put it that way. So the price is just right for this as well. It's free for the community. Everybody can join. So hope to see you there next week.
Not to be missed. I've seen Nickolaj do some deep dives into these things, so that should be a great session to see you two bounce off of each other for sure.
Thank you.
All right. Looks like we've got a couple of comments and questions coming in. Danny, following up on LEDBAT again, has been using LEDBAT for years. Even built 4 machines on a 10 meg site, took 12 hours, and had no drops in latency on the site. Highly recommended also. That is awesome to hear that.
Yep. Good stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Matt's asking, I have an app that needs to be installed on both laptop and desktop, but it is only installed on laptops.
I'm assuming if this is task sequence or something, that it is a condition that is not set up right, like a variable is laptop, is desktop, or a chassis types that is unknown. For example, if you're using some of the older scripts from the MDT integration, they don't have all the newer chassis types in them, whereas the PowerShell equivalent that Johan put together does have those updated numbers, but I would actually have to see that logic, or at least see a log file, because it will tell you whether a condition evaluated to true or not in the SMSTS log file.
Yep, that would make sense. Question coming in from Facebook. Are there any recommendations to speed up image deployment to endpoints when imaging multiple computers via MDT?
I get a faster server, but that's probably not the answer you want to hear. Improved networking, of course, can be done, but usually what we see is 2 approaches. Either you go back about 2 decades in time and you start to play around with multicast. That can easily allow you to deploy 300, 400, 500 machines at the same time, assuming your network is capable of supporting it. What we have done lately, though, is that we have spent a lot of time adding in peer-to-peer support for MDT. So through our extension, Friends of MDT, if you extend MDT with a little bit of PowerShell, you get branch cache and peer-to-peer support on that platform. And that allows clients to start to fan out. So you deploy to say 50 machines. One will obviously start sooner than the other. It's always going to be one that starts first. But as soon as that first client receives just the first block of whatever file is being downloaded, it's going to start sharing that to the next client that in turn will share to the next. And the more client, the faster it goes. It almost feels like BitTorrent, but it is not. It's a different technology, of course, but that would allow you to do very quick deployments without having to deal with all the multicast hassles that you may stumble across. But this is what I've seen. Of course, you can have multiple deployment servers and then use stuff like that, but either go back old school multicast, wouldn't really recommend it, but or go peer-to-peer. Those are pretty much the only options you have in that case. So I did just before Christmas, I did 2 videos, or recorded 2 videos on how to set up that extension for MDT. I did it for cloud imaging support, but that cloud server can be on your data center, and then it's on-premises imaging, so all of a sudden. And then I did a follow-up video on how to enable this through peer-to-peer. Obviously, adding in things like doing WIM files instead of a large packet with 1,000 files. If you have large applications, we talked about that many times here on the Academy. But if you have a stupid app, size-wise, like 3D Studio Max, which is 4 gigs in size, 20-some thousand files, if you put that app into a WIM file, it's about a third of the size, and it's a single file. Night and day, the performance different to download a tinier file, single file, than trying to get a 4 gig package down with almost 20,000 small files in it. So that will also, of course, speed up. I don't recommend WAN accelerators. They usually cause more troubles that they were there to save in the first place. So I try to avoid those. But multicast and peer-to-peer, definitely 2 viable options.
Awesome. Good stuff. Right. Robert is asking on YouTube, in a previous meeting, you suggested using SQL or an alternative backup process and not the built-in SCCM backup. Could you be more specific?
I'll be happy to.
I was thinking that might be a little fresh in your mind.
Yes. So ConfigMgr obviously comes with a built-in backup option. This one here that I never, ever enable and use at all, ever. I rather go to the dentist and have a root canal done, and I don't like dentists at all. So that's like not going to happen, put it that way. It's much better to use a native SQL backup. The reason I recommend to use a native SQL backup, and it can be as simple as just having a maintenance plan of sort in SQL. This one will compress the backup. So if you have a 100 gig database, it's going to be maybe 20-30% of that at most, sometimes even lower. So it will allow you to have quicker backups being done, and you can keep more of them in an archive before it loads out of this space. We have customers where we have the database almost up to a terabyte in size. And I rather have a 200 gig archive of that than multiple 1 terabyte backups. And even worse, though, because disk space, after all, it can be arranged. When the ConfigMgr native backup runs, it stops the service for distribution of content and a few other services. But it means that if you have an environment like this, where you have multiple distribution points, and one of them is remote to the site server. So say that you upload a new image, it's a 10 gig image, it has some apps in it, and you start to distribute that image out to a remote distribution point over a WAN link that is not very quick, or at least it's heavily used. So it's going to take maybe 30 hours to get the content out there. Well, at midnight, the backup is going to kick in and kabam, cut that distribution. So now the server has to start it again and try to distribute it, just to be cut off the next day at midnight. And sometimes you will never get the content out there. So I do not like the native backup at all. I prefer a normal SQL backup. And I recommend to also make sure you back up other things that is important for the backup to work. We talked about making sure you have the cd.latest folder in the backup so you can actually restore the system, kind of a point with having a backup. Backup reports that you might have, backup data sources if you have them, everyone has. Back up the content library so you can restore the server more quickly than having it being generated up. Back up user state data if you have that. There's a lot to a ConfigMgr backup. You might be tempted to take a snapshot. It's not supported. Happens to work most of the time, but it is not supported. And the reason it's not supported is A, it's not being tested. 2, you may actually reintroduce stuff that has been replicated through SQL or through other mechanisms in the ConfigMgr environment. And that may cause troubles. And troubleshooting SQL replication is not really that fun. Same reason we don't use secondary sites anymore. So, anyhow.
Alrighty. We've got one more question in here from Matt. What are inboxes in SCCM and what information we can get? I think I could take that from a high level if you'd like and can add to it. So the inboxes in ConfigMgr are basically the folders in which files are coming and going out of the infrastructure. Some of the common examples that you would see are hardware inventory, discovery data, software inventory, as well as bad or corrupt inventory data has their own directory that you could look at to see, say if you have a client that is sending bad data or sending corrupt data or something along those lines, you could see what's going on with that client. Inboxes are something that you want to monitor for sure to make sure you have a healthy site server. These can grow. They can grow in size. They can grow in their amount. And that may tell you that you have a larger problem. An example would be if you have clients, if you've configured your clients to send a lot of hardware inventory data, but haven't increased the size of the hardware inventory file that they could send, you would get some, basically a lot of messages saying that you have clients that are unable to send you hardware inventory at that point, is a common one that I see. So not sure if you have something you'd like to add to that, Johan?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen scenarios where a component in ConfigMgr breaks down, so you start to generate hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of log files, and then the backup won't work and other things won't work. And there are some, I've seen some community solutions for basically monitoring inbox file counts and whatnot, and creates alert if they hit a certain threshold level. So for normal operations, you don't usually have to deal with those much, but when troubleshooting things, yeah, you may have to. ConfigMgr also uses these to initiate certain things. Like, hey, I want to do a full sync of a software update point against my WSUS. Yeah, you can just drop a file and it will do it. But there are other ways in PowerShell and to do the same thing. But ConfigMgr does a lot of things of this in the backend. For example, if I would go to a site server and I would do a software library and right click and do initiate a sync of here and say yes to that one, and then I would open up the that was pure luck. I actually had that one open. Anyhow, this one here, it will say right away, wake up as in inbox drop. And that meant ConfigMgr dropped the file in an inbox and took action on that thing. So you will see a lot of that stuff as well. And now I had to wait 3 hours when it's synchronizing, but that's that's another story. So yeah, good questions.
Yes.
Dang. What logs can I use to monitor Autopilot? There really is no central monitoring for Autopilot, but there are plenty of things you can do on the client side for it. That, I think, will take a little bit more time than we have today, but I'll be happy to cover a little bit that next week. because there are event logs, there are diagnostic scripts that you can download, there are native diagnostics that you can gather in Intune these days, or have Autopilot gather and then you can review it. Microsoft have done some work on that lately, so I'll be happy to cover some of that next week. So yay!
We've got some good homework for next week.
Yeah. Everyone who joined, thank you so much. Andrew, thank you for hanging in here, and enjoy the rest of the day. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye for now.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Have a great week, everybody.